Yeah, so it's really important to recognize that hybrid remote takes a lot more intentionality to do it well. I think one of the biggest challenges there is that leadership teams are suddenly responsible for managing really two separate employee experiences. If you have some people who often work in the office and some people who don't, so you really can't just replicate the in-office experience remotely and hope for the best, but you also can't go back to the office first culture and expect it to be a good experience for the team members who are not there every day.
Hi, Betsy. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm really good. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. It's something I love to talk about, so thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Our guest today is Betsy Bula from GitLab. I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing you. I want you to do that. So, why don't you tell us what your role is at GitLab and a little bit of your background and history with the company?
Absolutely. So I'm Betsy. I am an all remote evangelist at GitLab, and I'm based in North Carolina. GitLab is actually one of the world's largest all remote companies. So we've been remote since 2015, and we've really been able to intentionally build our culture around remote work from the start. And all remote for us means that we have zero offices. So everyone, including our CEO, works remotely. And today we have 1,300 plus team members across 65 countries around the world. So it's really cool team to be a part of. And we also make a collaboration platform. So the GitLab tool is a single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle, and it's used by developers around the world. So that's something that we're really proud of. But then our organizational design is also just fascinating. And so my team's job is to share remote work with the world. And, we kind of codify how we do remote to help others do that on their teams as well. So we've actually developed over 50 guides that kind of put that into documentation for other people to see and benefit from. And then we've distilled those guides down into one resource, which is our playbook. So
Hmm.
we've been doing this long before the pandemic, but now everyone's eyes are sort of open to the possibilities for the future, and it's cool to be able to share that with the world.
Absolutely. I mean, there is so much documentation from GitLab online, and I've been so keen to have this conversation with you because the way that you are helping organizations kind of take that step and deliver a little bit more flexibility in the way people work, as we move transition from like a pandemic world into a post-pandemic world. There
Yes.
is a lot of appetite for documentation like the ones you've been building since 2013 or 2014. So
Mhm.
there is so many things we can talk about, but the one thing that I want to start with is something that I find really interesting and that I've been hearing and reading a lot about recently, which is this concept of being intentional when you are embracing a more flexible way of work. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means, who owns that, how to get started?
Sure. So first, I'll kind of take a step back because you mentioned, the pandemic and kind of coming out of that pandemic time period. And it's so important that we all acknowledge that what we've been living through is not remote work at its best. It's really forced work from home during a global pandemic. So it's an important, kind of level setting to take because we're now entering a world where companies can be much more intentional and really think through these processes and make informed decisions now that we've kind of gotten through this crisis mode of the past year, 15 months, 18 months. So it's great that now we can really kind of take a step back and look at what we want organizations to be, kind of doing as they go forward. And people have really learned over these past 15 months that they can live and work differently. They can work anywhere with an internet connection. They've been able to reclaim a lot of their time that was once spent on a commute and be able to invest in their families or their hobbies or their community. And so you really can't put that genie back in the bottle. It's something that top talent is going to want to have. They're going to need that flexibility, and they're going to be able to have a high impact career no matter where they live. And so it doesn't require them to live in a tech hub. So companies that want to be able to continue to attract and retain that talent are going to have to be intentional about the things that they're looking for. So things like, listening to your team and really taking their feedback and incorporating that so that you're not just kind of passing down what the leadership team wants out of the future, really
Hmm.
like asking what your team is what's most valuable to them. Um, Also, how you upskill your team is really important to be intentional about that. So, making sure that they're set up for success and have opportunities to learn how to best work remotely and what that looks like. And then being intentional about tools is important, how you use them, what tools you use. And then informal communication is another huge piece. And, that kind of impacts things like culture and how your team gets along with one another. So, all of those pieces we could talk about for hours, but that intentionality really filters into everything that you do as you're kind of going through this transition.
So what is the first step that's an organization moving into, let's say there's a lot of businesses moving into hybrid or adopting a hybrid as a way moving forward. Is there a step by step plan that they should be putting in place, and how that looks, including that idea of being more intentional in the way they approach things?
Yeah, so it's really important to recognize that hybrid remote takes a lot more intentionality to do it well. I think one of the biggest challenges there is that leadership teams are suddenly responsible for managing really two separate employee experiences. If you have some people who often work in the office and some people who don't, so you really can't just replicate the in-office experience remotely and hope for the best, but you also can't go back to the office first culture and expect it to be a good experience for the team members who are not there every day.
Yeah.
So, that said, we absolutely recognize, even though we are an all remote team, we know that a lot of companies have determined that hybrid is the best next step for them. And so the bottom line is that really every type of organizational design can benefit from remote first practices. So we do have a whole guide, blueprint, whatever you want to call it, in our handbook. Um, it's actually our all remote guide is at allremote.info. So people can look that up. You can find our whole section on hybrid.
We'll put it
Um,
on the description of the video. It's an
that's
amazing
great.
tool. Yep.
Good. Okay, I'm so glad. Yeah, that's a great resource to start with
Yep.
because it outlines a lot of the things that, we tend to encourage teams to look out for. Um, One of the things I'll call out that's really important is like executive sponsorship. So making sure that your whole leadership team, not only are they aligned and how they feel about flexible work and what your approach is going to be, but that they're really like walking the walk and not just saying that they embrace flexible work and not really living that out.
Yep.
So, one of the things that we actually suggest is that leaders try to stay out of the office as much as possible. And the reason we say that is that signals are more powerful than policies. So, you might have a leader who says that they, are committed to flexible work, and then they're at the office every single day. So, what does that really say?
Yeah.
So, this allows them to really show that you're serious about it and also like identify gaps and things that you wouldn't know about that you're missing if you weren't actually experiencing remote work yourself. So setting that example is one of the best ways to avoid that two-tier way of working in a hybrid setting. um, and then the other thing that's really important is just removing the office from the equation as you're making a lot of these decisions. So if you focus on how work gets done and how your team communicates with one another and remove the where from the equation, you actually are going to build processes that naturally can be used wherever work's getting done, whether that's at home or in the office on any
Yeah.
given day. It doesn't matter because you've prepared it in a remote first way. So it almost requires you to treat the office as a venue to work remotely, just like you would your home. And I think that's another important piece is that teams and leaders are understanding of each other and can embrace the fact that this is an iterative thing.
Yep.
It's not just a light that you flip on overnight. And it's, even for a all remote company like GitLab, it's something we're constantly iterating on. So you're
Yeah.
never done with figuring out remote work. It's a process just like it is for an in-office team, figuring out the best ways to work in an office. We're doing the same thing, just in a different setting.
It's okay, I guess. for both organizations and individuals to feel okay that it's not going to be perfect from day one,
Right.
right? Like it's a process, and you're going to continuously learn.
Exactly.
You touched on something that we're super passionate about, which is um, informal communication,
Yep.
and that includes like company culture and how you build that. Can we talk a little bit about it and how you guys do it at GitLab?
Absolutely. We, so much of culture for a co-located company is more about the physical perks of the office or, a vibe that you get while you're in the office or like happy hours, ping pong tables, those things that are physically there. But there's so many unwritten rules left when a culture is built around something like that. So really the only way to do it in a remote or flexible hybrid setting is to document it. So we at GitLab document our 6 core values, and then within each of those values, you find like very clearly laid out sub values, which are like
Mm-hmm.
substantiators, and they describe how to live out that value, like what behaviors go into making that happen every single day. And so outlining how we live out those values is really how we make sure that every new team member understands how we interact with one another, how we communicate, how we get work done. And it means that you have no unwritten rules and you're able to actually sustain that culture as you continue to grow. Many teams saw over the past year that a lot of the things that they said were their culture got stripped away because they suddenly weren't in the office.
Yeah.
And so being able to have something that's, always written down and can be seen by anyone and is accessible to anyone is really the best way to do that in a scalable way. Um, Informal communication is also so important there because that is something that also needs to start from the leadership level. So, when you're operating remotely, you have to be much more intentional about setting up those moments for people to connect and build relationships than you would if they could just run into each other in the hallway or grab lunch or whatever they might have done in the office. So, we have lots of ways that we foster that at GitLab. There's a whole page on informal communication, so I would encourage people to look that up, but a lot of the examples are there of things that we do like coffee chats and virtual meals together. We've had teams do cooking classes together, talent shows. We have juice box chats, which is like the kid version of coffee chats for people to kind of
Yep.
get their children together. So the idea is that you're connecting as human beings and not as coworkers necessarily, and it really helps that then you get to know each other on a more personal basis, and then your work goes better because you have that relationship built. So in many ways you actually build more relationships faster than you might if you just saw someone passing in the hall every single
Mm.
day. Um, another thing that is important to highlight is that we, even though we're an all remote company, still see great value in in-person meetings. So, we gather in a typical world, with COVID, it's not been possible, but we tend to gather every 9 months as a team somewhere in the world to really focus on that relationship building. So we try not to work during that time, but the idea is that we like get together and have team time, and that way our async work when we're back, at our homes or wherever people work remotely, is more smooth because we have those relationships. So it's important to have that foundation, but
Yep.
it allows you to work better together when you are virtual or not able to get together the way we have for the past 15 months. But all of that goes into building that culture that's scalable and doable, and able to sustain any crisis, whatever
Yep.
may come.
So there is a really important piece from leadership in making these
Hmm.
moments available and
Yep.
and kind of ritualizing them and making them like be super intentional about this. Uh, but there's also a responsibility or like from an individual to actually want to be part of moments like these.
Right.
And I guess when you're working from home or from a place that is not the office where you're surrounded by your colleagues, it's easier to just say, "Oh, I don't want to join that session," or "I'm just gonna continue doing my emails," or whatever it is.
Right.
How do you inside your organization try to foster that sense of importance or put a lot of importance into moments like this to get people
Yeah.
to get people's buy-in.
So some of it, goes back to the idea that people are so different in the amount of social interaction that they want and need, and the amount of breaks they need to take during the day and things like that. So part of the beauty of remote work is that you have that autonomy to figure out what works best for you, what your peak productivity hours are, and then you work during those times, and what
Yeah,
if you might live alone, you would be more interested in making those connections socially with people during the day to get that part of your life more fulfilled. And so
yeah,
I think we partially are very, we put a lot of importance in people being a manager of one and figuring out what that looks like for them. That certainly doesn't mean that when we have like a team meeting, we do want to build the connections between the whole team and get them together and have that team bonding time. But we really try not to make meetings mandatory because we want to have that autonomy for our team members and give them the ability to contribute asynchronously if they have something going on in their lives or they need to just step out for the day or for an hour or whatever it may
yep,
be. One part of our values is that we're family and friends first and work second. So we try to really underscore that in everything that we do, that no matter what's happening, your family and your friends or your personal life, that comes first. So, allowing people to decide, do I want to invest my spare time in my community or in my family or whatever it may be, versus, being required to join a happy hour. We don't want to make people make those decisions. So it's definitely a balance. And I think it requires a lot of example setting, again, from the leadership team. Um, and just documenting it so that people truly know, like, okay, they said this meeting's optional and they mean it.
yep, yep,
Not just that you're saying that, but you expect people to be there. So
yeah,
that's an important one because people have really burned out over the past year with Zoom fatigue and feeling like,
100%, yeah.
yeah, like they have to join every happy hour because the team said so. And so giving people a little bit more of that decision making power is important too.
It's incredible how everything falls back into trust and like autonomy when we want to give people flexibility.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we really encourage people to build their work around their life and not have work dictate everything
Yeah,
about your life. So that's the beauty of remote work. And so when it's done right, it really gives people that, um, the always elusive work-life balance. It does help,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it again takes a lot of intentionality.
Um, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the onboarding process of someone that joins a company. Well, you guys have a lot of experience on this front, onboarding people from all around the world without a single office space. How does that look, and how does informal communication and culture building fall into this process so that people kind of feel that they're part of the organization, fully part of the organization from or since day one?
Right. Onboarding is so crucial in really the overall employee experience. And so for GitLab, we start people from the very first day with what we call an onboarding issue. So for people who aren't familiar with GitLab, an issue in the GitLab tool is sort of like a project page almost. So we have this long list that is a template for every new hire. And it gives them a single source of truth of what is expected of them for the first day, week, even, going out beyond the first 30 days. And so they have that all written down from the very start. And so it kind of not only takes away the mystery from the process, but it also sort of gets them into the mindset of thinking about documentation, which is so important in everything that we do at GitLab. And it just transparently outlines like what's expected of them. So we don't just leave them with that and hope that they finish the list. We do have onboarding buddies that are paired with new hires so that they have somebody that they can kind of like tap on the shoulder for questions or things that they couldn't find in the handbook. And then that person can help them, for example, add that question to the handbook so that future new hires aren't wondering about the same thing.
Yeah,
So that period of time is so important because a lot of, especially for GitLab, a lot of new hires are really unlearning a ton of sort of old corporate habits that are from either a co-located experience or in some cases a remote experience that wasn't the same as how we work at GitLab. So there's a lot of unlearning and relearning to do, but we really try to outline everything that they need to know, and direct them to handbook pages that they're going to want to reference later on, and give them that time to sort of just digest everything before they start their actual job. So having that period of time blocked out for onboarding and really encouraging the team member to focus on that is super important, so that they're not kind of scrambling and trying to dive right into their role. That also plays really in a big way into culture, because it gives them time to look at things like the values that hopefully they already bought into during the interview process. But it's setting up coffee chats with people so that they can get to know other team members and ask them what the most difficult part of onboarding was, and spending that time to get to know other people, so that as they continue to get into their role, they feel like they have those people they can go to or just have a conversation with when they need a break. And just kind of building that remote muscle in the first couple of weeks, so that they're then prepared for the rest of their role. It just sets people up for success, because if you try to mimic sort of the in-office onboarding experience, like having one class, for example, and then just sending people out into the world, they very well might kind of lose their way and not want to stay at your company. So it's important for retention too.
Yeah, setting them up for success.
Yeah. Again, I've mentioned several times, and I know we're going to put it in the description, but we really encourage everyone to use the resources that we've created. The GitLab handbook, if it were printed, would be over 10,000 pages. So it is a massive living document that's updated by everyone at GitLab. And so check that out. Check out the GitLab's Guide to Remote, which is part of the handbook as well. But you can really find things from our actual remote guides all the way to trainings for your teams, certifications for remote work. Our playbook and a remote work report are also on there with some fascinating insights. So check it out, contribute to it. We always want to hear from other people, and we're just really looking forward to the future and the way that all this unfolds with the future of work for the whole world. So it's going to be an exciting
It's exciting times.
Yep.
Exciting times
Thanks
indeed.
for having me.
No, Betsy, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you in the next time. Thanks.
Sounds good.